morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. It's actually kind of nice day here in the city of Philadelphia. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson. He, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. And we've got a good show for you today. Um, we'll talk a little bit about injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's a Martin Luther King Jr. quote, in case you didn't know. We'll talk a little bit about Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the Fanta Bility case, how three police officers have decidedly all of a sudden become held accountable for their actions and shooting wildly in public. We'll talk a bit about the filibuster. The filibuster is being debated in the Senate today. We'll talk about Joey Bologna and his a little bit of PPD history, Philadelphia Police Department history. And we're going to talk about vote counting and kind of the new attack on democracy. Not necessarily very new, but a new focus by certain people that have last names that rhyme with rump. That they're trying to how they're trying to attack democracy. But first up, we're going to have Ms. Tamara Anderson. She is with Gumbo Lab, and let me bring Tamara on screen. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Say hi to everyone. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, and what it is you do.
Hello, hello. Name is Tamara Anderson, she, her pronouns, and I am the main producer and founder of the Gumbo Lab. And I am still a professional actress and artist, and I also teach. We've all gone back to college teaching, I should say, even though we have started some classes virtually because of the variant, this Decepticon transformer type variant. So those are all the things underneath my hat, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. I'm just fixing a technical problem here on my phone as we talk. Um, the the weird ways that Zoom works sometimes, so we don't have you laid out correctly because I didn't have my cell phone joined. There you go. Now you're in the center of the frame. All right. So tell me a little bit more. You have um, a film festival coming up, and you're going to be doing
Yes.
fundraising over the course of the month of February.
Yes. So we have a film festival coming out called Radical Imaginings. Came up with it, of course, after the shutdown of 2020, 2021, but also just everything that is happening in K through 12 education classrooms and in the rest of the world. And so I thought it'd be a really nice idea to have an intergenerational film festival, 10-minute film festival, encouraging amateurs and professionals to participate, starting with grade 7. So working with some teachers to get their students kind of involved, to tape what's around them, teach them some editing techniques. And basically it'll be a virtual festival. I know people are like, oh, I'm tired of virtual stuff, but you know what? It's not going anywhere. So, sorry to tell you. So take advantage and jump on the train. But I also I have not actually reached out to them yet, but one thing that I would like to do, which is another reason why we're doing it in the spring when it gets a little warmer, is I would like to bring back the drive-in movies we had at the Naval Yard to see if that could be a possibility to show like the top films from each category that way too.
That would be fantastic. That would be awesome. Um, What how are you going about fundraising? What are your fundraising needs?
So yeah, so we're doing some grassroots fundraising. So it's three projects. So one is the Radical Imagining. Another one is a solo show. So my solo show, Black Bitch Kate, oops, excuse my French, is basically this original show that we've already had two readings for, gotten tons of feedback about. It has original music in it. And so just like anything else, right now we're down to wire of and so just like anything else, right now we're down to wire music of college and bonus and things like that. We also want to use all the correct cameras on some of the, but we also, if you want your project to be ready to go, like for streaming platforms, whether it be Netflix, Prime, it's really good to tape it correctly the first time so you don't have to like redo it. So we're putting all that into the budget and working with some local people as far as like how does that look, because what I want to do is we want for the solo shows, this is my solo show, we want for this show to be taped and also for it to be a combination. So we're fusing together two genres. Dang, dang, dang. Where did you see that before? Where I did it before last year. Is that you'll see parts of it will be live performed on a stage, and parts of it will include B-roll and traditional film settings. And so in order to get that just right, we want to make sure that we have enough funds for that. So we're doing a crowdsourcing. We already have some lovely patrons who have signed up as of last year with those projects in mind. So it's really making a more of a purposeful push, I should say, on top of me doing some grant writing and things like that. But we're also reaching out to the world and to the public to give what they can starting in February. And that information, you'll see it pushed out on across all of our social media platforms, which is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll see those. There'll be videos and talks and conversations like that. And so that's the second project. And then the third project is to do a mini residencies. We did a full residency with about 4 artists last year around the same time between December and February. And so what we would like to do this summer is to do a 6-week residency for local artists, specifically local female identifying artists who have solo projects, like who have solo shows. Like I got this show in my brain, I really want to get it done. And I know some people have asked me about, what if I've written a play and I want to have a reading? Yes, you can definitely reach out to me. I have tons of actors who will come together, whether it be virtually or whether it be in a nice COVID safe space, because I do believe in those things, that you can actually read your work and hear it, right? And I can help you provide like a really nice stipend for people, because I do believe that we should always pay people for their time, even when your budget is $5 and a McDonald's Big Mac, because I understand that too. But I also understand what it means to get to the next writing phase of your work. You sometimes need to hear where it is, right? And sometimes those spaces aren't always available, or you just don't have the people like available to help you with it, right? Like you need actors to really embody that vision for you and infuse some work. You'll find some. I've been doing a lot of readings of new work the last couple of months, and every time I do it, the playwright is like, I would have never thought of that scene that way until I heard it that way. And so now let's make these changes and fixes, right? Like it helps a lot. And if we want to continue to see new work to be produced, we have to support people on the ground level while they're working on it.
Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
can definitely reach out to me through the Gumbo Lab website, and we can make that happen for you. But as far as like what the fundraising is supporting Radical Imagining, the 10-minute film festival, Black Bitch Cape, the solo project, and a mini residency for and I hate to say emerging artists, because that makes it sound like I'm only looking for 20 somethings, but I know that there's people of all ages out there that have some wonderful shows that just have not been seen or done or haven't had support. So never let that not stop you from reaching out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are organizations out there that do the same thing, but it's great to have more opportunity for emerging artists. And like you said, when we say emerging, people should be aware that emerging artist doesn't mean, you're fresh out of college. Emerging artist means that
Hmm.
you are at a stage in your career where you need to develop, where you need to change.
Hmm.
And that could be somebody who's been doing the art for 60 years, but they're just getting into writing, or they're just or they're finally putting something on its feet that they've had in a drawer, or been working on over the last 20 years.
And
Um,
even get into directing, right?
yeah,
Because like we provided a space for new directors, actually. Like some of the pieces that were done last year, it was first time directors, in there. Maybe people were about to pivot as far as how they thought of themselves as cinematographers and editors. It provided a very rich opportunity. The feedback a lot because we took, you take feedback and surveys at the end of every project. And one of the things that kept coming back over and over again is this is the first time I really didn't have to think about what I needed. I got to focus like just on the writing. And that's something that's huge. A lot of times when we go to some of these residencies, it's recommended like who do you want to direct? Who do you want to be a dramaturg? As opposed to just having them there in the space waiting for you to wrap around you and kind of support you along the journey.
right, right. Um, Yeah, we do a lot of similar work at the Philadelphia Dramatist Center.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the president pro tem of that organization right now, and it's tough. I know it's tough, like just getting people on board with doing a show in any sort of way right now is tough, and it's we initially, during the pandemic, we saw an uptick in people joining us, and people coming to our bi-monthly happy hours. So we do a happy hour, which is just it's a script in hand reading of new works,
Mm-hmm.
and by members of PDC, and it's a great way to get your stuff read. But people are feeling that Zoom fatigue, that virtual fatigue. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how are you working against that Zoom fatigue? How are you trying to find a way around
I
that?
mean, I think one of the ways to do it is trying to locate spaces in the city, and also providing so like being so me as a reader, where I have felt the most comfortable is when the organization was like, we're going to test you when you come in. Having access to those types of things, like doing rapid tests when you come in, making it a very small reading as much as possible if needed. Um, Making sure, providing vaccination cards, things like that. Now, some people may say, well, that's too much, but it literally, for me, I know it made the artists want to come, and it made the artists feel I could take this mask off now and really dive into this work, right? So kind of making a mixture of having those spaces available, but also, meeting on Zoom too. So I've noticed, I mean, and even in professional world right now, we are rehearsing in Zoom. We're having table reads in Zoom like the first week of rehearsal. Like that's not uncommon at a lot of theaters now. Um, Especially yeah, and then the second week people come into the space and start moving around. So as much as we are fatigued by it, there is some sort of expectation, right? And then I also try to like encourage, especially people who are still wanting to act, right? Or even those who want to direct. I encourage them to still do a hybrid, a mixture of both, because of the fact that I know all my TV and film stuff that I have been booking. I've literally been booking from self tapes and Zoom callbacks. So it's also like um, using this space as kind of like to school yourself on how's the best way to light myself and look amazing for this casting director. Because one thing I will tell you is that it saves people, saves them money actually to do this space, right? But it also saves us money from going shuttling back and forth between New York and other spaces, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even local films that are filming here in Philly and in Camden, everything happens here first,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of table reads happen here first. So my thing is, um, what better way to practice reading to the camera in your laptop than to participate in a reading of a new piece, right? But if you still are like, but I think it's also about finding those spaces that have, decent ventilation and you can pretty much like, well, now you can't find a test if you knock it down, but like collecting COVID tests so that you can also have it ready, like provide like some sort of checkpoint for people. I think that would be, I mean, those are things that I'm thinking about as far as moving forward, with things and projects. And it's worked. Like I said, it's worked on both ends. Like me being a reader, me being asked to direct, it has made people feel at ease, to have that.
Yeah, yeah. Just to segue a little bit, today is the official start day of covidtests.gov. That's with
Mm-hmm.
an S, COVID test S, COVID tests multiple.gov, which is funny that they chose COVID tests plural because you literally it's a you can get 4 free COVID tests for each residential mailing address that you have access to. So if you go to covidtest.gov today, actually you could have started yesterday because they opened up the website yesterday. It'll redirect you to the United States Postal Service's website, and it's usps.com/COVID tests. And you can enter your information and get COVID tests. What I've seen so far, there seem to be a few problems. The rollout isn't going quite as planned. So residential addresses, that includes apartment buildings, and a lot of people I've seen complaining on the internet that somebody else at their residential address already claimed the for free test. So that seems to be
Oh,
problematic.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Workarounds that I've seen, I have seen some workarounds, which is you could enter your apartment number in the first line of the address field. Most people put it in the second line, but you can enter it in the first line of the address field after your street address, and that should still be recognized as a residential street address, and then it qualifies for separate four set of tests. Yeah, that's a kind of odd workaround, but anyway, but yeah, tests they're hard to get a hold of. We've got the federal government sending them out to every residential address, but it's only 4. That's it. Like it's
Right.
not for a month. It's not for a week. It's 4.
That's 4. That's it. And I think like too, and it's so funny because depending, I have friends who went south, like, we lived in Georgia, Alabama, place like that for the holidays, and tests were in overabundance at CBS. And so there's a lot of people who are in those states who brought those tests back to Philadelphia with that. Because they were like, well, clearly nobody here wants these. Let me just take them back upstate. So yeah, not that I'm recommending you to do a dry run as I wait like that, but there are
I
some
think you
areas that
you might have gotten something in your eye there to
right. I was like, there are some areas, who are like, oh, we shouldn't wear masks. I'm like that. So they might have some tests too for you. But yeah, no, it's it's like, I mean, it's a crazy thing. And I also think too, it's like I was talking about this right? The transition. In fact, I think I talked to you even like individually about this, James, is that as theaters, you know, especially when we look at all the shows that had to close very early because of cases and things like that, and whether you were asymptomatic or symptomatic, and the number of understudies that had to go on for Broadway, and then also like how when you look at regional theaters now, they are unequivocally listing their audition notices being like there will be no understudies. They're like, good luck, Buttercup. And so,
So
you
just
know,
cancel shows then.
right, like what's happening, they're doing shorter runs, they're trying to do smaller shows. I mean, of course, I think, you know, you have to be a little suspect when it's a big musical and it's like a really long run. And, you know, actors are making different decisions. Let me just say that. They're not just jumping in and, you know, and they're demanding a little bit more from these spaces. So I think one thing that's not going to go away, like Clyde, Lynn Nodge's new show, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that it was streaming for 2 weeks in January. Just because the theaters in, you know, if you're not going to regional theaters are pretty good about like they're comfortable usually, but Broadway theaters have always, people love to tell you, well, people just getting bigger. No, people back in the day will tell you they were sucky too. They are horrible. They've always been horrible, right? They're very small seats, they're not very accessible. If you have any sort of joint issues, like my mom is unable to like straighten one of her knees completely, like those seats are horrible for those spaces. So having options to stream a show that you're still paying to go see, usually like at a pretty decent price, it allows you to see the comfort of your home. So I'm just saying, like, as somebody who's directing or somebody who's thinking about going into producing, yes, we do have fatigue about it, but I do want to hearken you to continue to um equip yourself and be prepared to like do shows either way.
And yeah,
You know, I think it's
I also
best.
want to. I also want to say, you know, like there's a kind of somewhat quasi public debate going on about whether, as we return to in person production, should we also be doing the live streaming service as
Mm-hmm.
well. And yeah, I think yes.
Yeah.
You're saying yes. I mean, I don't see a reason that we should not be doing live streaming. Yes, to do it correctly is expensive. I just had a client. You know, I sent them an estimate, and they were like, "What?" And I'm like, "Sorry." um, you know, I still need 4 crew on site, and I still need, you
Mm-hmm.
know, thousands of dollars of equipment on site, and I need to pay for all of that somehow. So, yeah,
Right. But I think like if you include that in your budget, like think about how much money you lose when you have to close
right.
early. Or think about how much money you lose because you know now the tickets, because now you know now that COVID is here, tickets no longer like you can get a refund. They're like, well, we told you that might happen. Oopsie. You know what I'm saying? So my thing is if you budget that into how you sell tickets, right? And especially if you are doing a combination, like if you have union actors, non-union actors, um, actors equity, despite how cocoa puffs they can be sometimes, they have created some pretty affordable, like you pay the actors this much per week that they are being streamed. But in all reality, if you do spend that money, you can do it for a week. You can stream it for a week. And in our reality, let's be real. If you are archiving the show, which has been a practice before, that also costs money. You know what I'm saying? If you're doing it correctly. So the whole thing is, I think it should be included just in the budget, just because my fear is that there was a virologist that was just on CNN a couple weeks ago, and she said something that was really powerful. She was like, something about the US and how they deal with COVID is that they haven't pivoted to the fact that it's not actually going anywhere. They keep thinking of it as like, when we get past this, we'll be able to get back to what we were. There is no back
There is no
there.
back.
There's There's only like where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is just like any other virus, it kind of muddles out, but it doesn't go anywhere. It kind of percolates right under the surface, just like anything else, until you find like a cure for it, things like that. So the whole thing is that if you continue to think about that, then you have to think about, okay, what worked and what didn't work. So what we do know is that during the whole streaming surge, is families with small children, people who have physical, any sort of a disability that makes it really difficult to sit in the theater for a long period of time. They were captive audiences. They spent money. I spent money to see a documentary that's now coming on Stars, I think, in 2 weeks. That was about Maurice Hines. That was amazing. That was part of the San Francisco Dance Festival. That was all virtual. My whole family watched it in the front room on our big TV. It was brilliant and brought us to tears. We loved it. And so my thing is, I would have rather had the opportunity to see that than have that project be shelved until we could get back in person, right? And I think the same thing can be said for theater. Does it replace live theater, you being in the seats and, really living with the actors? No, it doesn't. It is an alternative. It is like it's something else, right? It's just one more step. And I think that when we really think about art and the very definition of art, it's always about stretching those boundaries, right? It's always about thinking of something new. I mean, even how swings and understudies work has been told is a totally different thing, right? You have people playing roles that I forget the actress who's going on right now for Judas, for this Jesus Christ Superstar tour. They have never had a Black female sing for that role, even though I always thought it'd be brilliant to see that happen. You know what I'm saying? And so, yes, all these wonderful things are happening literally out of this situation, out of the chaos of this situation, right? So, yeah. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
Yeah, it's all right. I
Jumped on
mean,
a soapbox, but yeah.
I always love it when people jump on soapboxes. I do it all the time, and so I wonder where everybody else's passion is sometimes, because like I'm just here screaming in the void sometimes, and I feel like what?
Right. You're like, what's happening? I know sometimes you feel like you're by yourself. You're like, am I the only one that feels?
Am I the only one that sees all this? I feel like that crazy guy, with the strings everywhere and like multiple pictures up, like this is what's going on.
It also provides like more work opportunities, right?
Yeah.
For spaces like, like your space can like provide like intern opportunities for people. Like this is like a way into like work. You know what I'm saying? That people don't always have not always thought about.
Yeah, yeah. I a lot of you've made a lot of great points, and one of them that I noticed you talking about. It was just briefly in there, so this is a kind of rough segue. Sorry, audience. But you did briefly talk about that divide that seems to be a media focus right now in divide in politics and divide in the social setup of the United States. We have you have states that people can freely drive to. You can get there from here. And
you really can. It really is possible.
And the social reaction to the pandemic is completely different there. And this is something hard for folks to understand when like you're in a city like Philadelphia. And like everybody you see is complying with the mask mandate. Everybody you see doesn't care that we got to show our vaccine cards when we go to restaurants. Like I haven't seen one person complain about it. Like not legit complain about it. Like I've seen people like, throw a fit trying to be like some 15 minutes of fame idiot, but I haven't seen anybody legit complain about showing a vaccine card, because all you got to do is like, here, it's on my phone. There you go. Great. All right. And when you live in a city, the population density is so high. I live in my house, for the most part, and I still see people every day. Like I'm still exposed to people every day. So if you don't have your your vaccinations, and you live in the city, you're kind of you're lucky if you haven't caught COVID. Um, but so I wanted to talk a little bit about this kind of political social divide. It's a lot of it seems to be politically driven.
Oh, it is all a lot. It is not some, a lot. I mean, it's all. It's very because they have politicized health, right? They've connected it to their rights, like people's rights, and then they've kind of thrown in critical race theory, connected that to mass. I mean, the fact that they have made these huge leaps and conflated. I mean, sometimes I'm impressed with the creativity, but I'm just like, one doesn't have anything to do with the other, right? And having a daughter who goes to a college in a really small town, and you'll go to a Walmart where it's the only Walmart in the town, and the only people wearing masks are the employees, and everybody's skipping to doodah around the store with no mask on. And I'm thinking, like, that's crazy. But in their mind, they're like, well, nobody here is COVID. But I was like, but 1,600 students just came to your city from a whole different place,
Right,
like from a
right.
bunch of places, right? So you may want to rethink, walking around this Walmart free and live. You know what I'm saying? But even when you talk to them, that's not the reason. Like, I think I would be more respectful. They're like, well, I'm in a small town and we don't have any numbers. They're like, they will literally tell you, well, it's not right not to wear one.
No, no, no. I
What?
think I think if you actually delve into the psychology of it, I think that first part is the real reason. I think that the
Yeah.
first part, I think the second part, I think the politicalization is the justification. I think the first part
Yeah.
is the real reason. We live in this tiny small town. We know like five other people, and we know they
Mm-hmm.
don't have COVID, and we know all of their brothers and sisters, and we know they don't have
Right.
COVID. So who else am I going to see? Now, college towns that you're going to see other people, and you might want to be a bit more careful. But yeah, like you get to the rural area. I mean, that's the whole same thing with, like crime rates. Like, when you see
Mm-hmm.
a spike in crime in a rural area, it's done pretty quick because everybody knows who committed the crime, everybody knows who their brother is, and everybody
Right.
knows how to get a hold of them and hold them accountable. Um,
No, it is. And I think like publicly, so like right now there's a huge debate in Penn Ridge School Board. So we're seeing like these debates happening the counties around Philadelphia right now,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
So Penn Ridge School Board, and we're seeing, because Philadelphia doesn't have an elected school board, it has an appointed school board, some of these conversations aren't the same here. So I also want to preface that.
Well,
A
I
school
also want
board
to
in,
say I also want to say some of the conversations aren't the same here because this Philadelphia is completely anti-fascist, like from like the mayor on down. It's really hard for the fascist operators that like are like in the Proud Boys and everywhere else to
mhm.
do anything here. Like they can't. They have a really hard time being public here, and
I mean, they do, but you do see it. Like when so like perfect example, and not to counter that, but so in Philadelphia, we're one of the few counties. We are the only county, actually. I don't want to say the few. We're the only county in Pennsylvania where African American studies is a high school graduation requirement. Now we may think that that's a huge, like, oh, okay, but when you go down into the weeds, the curriculum for that said department, for that said history, has been very interesting, and not because they haven't had available to some amazing historians who have done the work. It's just that somehow every 10 years the work disappears, and for me that is an example of where that subversiveness lives, right? Like you have some schools in certain areas of the city that I've taught at who literally, have almost taught like some lost cause stuff as like stuff. And I was like, is that really happening in your class? What is happening? You know what I'm saying? So And the students I love, because they'll rat you out like a runaway. They'll be like, Miss Anderson, you know, so-and-so. I told him he was lying because Anderson said that stuff isn't true. I said, oh God, now you got me in trouble. Okay, fine, whatever. So I think the thing is that it's there, like right under the surface in certain neighborhoods. Does it take over? No, but it is right there. When we think about how long it took for the school board to approve the Black Lives Matter school curriculum, like it took them. I think we approached him in 2017, and it didn't become yes until 2019. And even that, it was followed by a bunch of bad news. Like they used the approval to be like, oh, and we don't have enough Chromebooks. I was like, what is happening? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I mean that's liberal politicians everywhere. Liberal politicians are like, oh, we'll give you free COVID tests, but it's 4 per address.
Right. Like enjoy. Right. And so when you look at Penridge, what I'm finding very enlightening is that students in these districts are challenging the adults. Like when you look at York, PA. So I think that was over the summer. No. Yeah, it was over the summer. The school board had voted to ban a book. The kids were like, we actually like that book. What is happening, right? And they did this whole protest. So what we're seeing more and more of that doesn't always get to the news is this pushback from this younger generation in these same areas, right? They are literally pointing fingers at the adults who are sometimes their parents and been like, but we were literally just learning about this last year. And now you're telling us that we shouldn't learn about it because it's going to make us feel ashamed. You know what I'm saying? And because it takes so much vitriol on social media with the crying mothers at the school board meetings, you know, my child learned about enslavement and now, you know, she's 8 and she's miserable. Is she though? Or are you just miserable? You know,
And you interview the children and they're like, no, we're not miserable. We
right?
get it.
We're fine. We get it. My mom just said that, you know, she was mad about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so we're finding a lot of that is happening. And I think like that divide even goes into like you were, you know, during like you were talking about voting and all this stuff. Like it feeds these mythologies and lies, right? So you have a group of people who are like, we don't need these rights for voting because they still firmly believe that voters fraud is a thing. When literally every every social scientist, every data collector, every bean collector said it literally is less than 2% across the country, right? So it's nothing for you to get your pennies in a bunch about. It's not a lot, right?
My favorite thing about voter fraud is every time they find voter fraud and they publish about it, it's always a Republican trying to vote for more Republicans. But
yeah, it's always in a small, like the smallest place, right? And you're just like that. So you want to police your own people? Yeah. Just tell them to stop doing it.
Yeah, I mean, just tell them. But I mean, okay, so this divide goes back. We like to focus on it. We like to say, oh, you know, like this is kind of, you know, like it's worse than it's ever been. I mean, this divide goes back.
It goes. It's been around.
It goes back. It goes back before the Civil War. It goes all the way back. You know, like you can find this divide in the Federalist Papers. You can find this divide before the country was even founded. And this is going to be yet another kind of rough segue. I apologize to the Senate. But that's why the Senate exists. That's why the Senate exists the way it is. You know, you had people at the very foundation of this country who believed that, you know, the people should rule, the general public should be in charge, and you had people who were abjectly afraid of the general public and abjectly afraid of true democracy, and without question, there is a danger of the tyranny of of large numbers. So there's a concept. This is for not to you, Tamara. I'm sure you understand this, but there's a concept, dear audience. in politics of the tyranny of the larger group. If you have a true democracy, you could end up with, if like all the voters voting for something that really hurts a small segment of the population. You could have now, right at the moment, socially, our population is well educated enough and well informed enough that it appears, at least from the outside, that most people are um, in favor of things that are good for the general population and even small
Mm-hmm.
populations. So when a light is shed on a policy or an idea that would be dangerous to a smaller segment of the population, the vast majority of voters are like, "No, we'll do what's good for that small segment of the population." So like
Mm-hmm.
we can talk about abortion rights. Abortion
Mm-hmm.
rights are good for the autonomy and the ability of women only to have bodily autonomy, have the ability to control
Mm-hmm.
themselves, have ultimate say over what happens to themselves from birth to death, and even after death. So um, that like that body autonomy only applies to a little over half the population, and then only not the entire little over half of that population cares about that bodily autonomy, but the grand majority of voters, something like 78%, are like, no, we should have abortion rights. Women should have reproductive rights. They should be able to decide for themselves what they want to do with their own bodies. Um, and so, how does this become a 50-50 split? How does this, in our representative democracy, which is supposed to
Mm-hmm.
be representative, how does this become, an issue that goes back and forth all the time? And how do we get to a Senate that won't do anything to move the yardsticks either way? And that's the same divide, going all the way back to.
Oh, it's the same. It goes back to, so it really goes back to Reconstruction. Really, that's where we really start to see, that's when we start to see hope, right, for the first time. So when people teach, in fact, there's this wonderful National Reconstruction Report. If you are very interested, it's on the Zen Education Project website. It was released January 13th. You should actually, everybody out listening, you should check it out. It talks about how basically horribly Reconstruction has been taught over the years. And because of this, it has a lot to do with what's happening now. So, because very few people even understand the 14th Amendment, which has a lot to do with everything that's been talked about today, which is on purpose, not on accident, that's just not fully taught, right? And then when we see that during Reconstruction, you have this large amount of Black male politicians who become senators and become this, who become voters, who really use voter. And this is the first time that public education is funded, ding, ding, along the South for everybody, regardless of race. Because even Black politicians were like, we understand that you don't want to go to school with us, and we probably don't want to go to school with you either. So here's your money, and here's our money, and here's our schools. Ooh, right? Like this is how things, going forward. So I think what happens has a lot to do with states' rights versus federal rights, right? So even though we do see that the majority of people are like, yeah, people should have right to do this. You have states like Mississippi, Louisiana that literally do not have access to abortion clinics, right? Because the state then, so this is the checks and balance. Even if we have this 50-50 thing above us, which has to deal with funding and the rules of the law, right? The law of the land. We also have states who can take those interpretations and either make it worse or make it better, right? Which is why as the US we are still an achieving democracy when you rate us, and not a full out democracy, right? We are an achieving democracy because of the fact of this back and forth, this shuttle, and the fact that especially now with Section 3 of the Voting Rights Act being gutted back in 2000 14, 15, can't remember, 13, one of those years. It which is what they're trying to basically reestablish in this new voting rights law. We have to ask ourselves, there is the one population in the US who has had to have several laws for voting over and over again, right? You like the fact that, how I teach my students is the fact that you have to constantly tell people that this group should have the right to vote, means that somehow the morality of the country doesn't really match always what we think it should be, right? Like Matthew Countryman said it best. He's the author of Up South, which talks about, it's a historical look at how Philly participated in the civil rights movement. Wonderful book. He's a local author, historian. And he said during a book talk that laws don't change the hearts of men. And that quote, that idea has stuck with me since he said it. Because as much as we fight, and we should continue to fight, this is definitely not me saying the fight should stop, is that it really does take a lot. So when we saw what happened last January, people literally crawling into the Capitol building, and you're sitting on your couch wondering, how the heck, how is that
How did
even
we get here?
possible?
Yeah.
Right. How did we get to this point? And of course, you could throw out the things about systemic racism and white supremacy, which we know are a part of that. You could be like, if there were a bunch of Black people, there would have been nobody in court because they'd all been shot down, dead, smoked to dead, a bunch of dead bodies in front of the Capitol.
Even if it had been white liberals, like
They've
Trump,
been shot
yeah,
down.
Trump had already brought the National
Right.
Guard out, like what,
For
three
them.
weeks or
Right.
earlier, yeah.
Right. And so my thing is that that's not enough. What happens is you start to say, especially when you think that these people are car salesmen, local blue collar workers, who the very person or the very entity that think represents them doesn't represent them. It represents moneyed interests, right? Which doesn't represent them. Like, if you really think about who represents them, it's like the original Rainbow Coalition that Fred Hampton had, right? That was your interest, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's why he was a danger, right? He was organizing in the Appalachian Mountains, in West Virginia, with the Young Lords, Puerto Rican, and he was bringing people together on a very visceral grassroots level, a very powerful level at 20 something. And so the whole thing is he was allowing people to see, yes, y'all hate each other, but y'all also are being treated the same way as these moneyed interests that are outside of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All of you are, like, you're being treated the same way. And I think that sometimes, due to like isolation, because like, especially we take a state like Pennsylvania where it's so spread out, it's not that you're going to intermingle with a whole lot of people, right? I think it's very easy to then isolate your thinking. It's very easy to think that it's very easy to be persuaded that what you're doing is the right thing. Like, you couldn't have told me last June, when there were only 10, maybe 9 states that were thinking about getting rid of like books about enslavement, books about Malcolm X. Like, you couldn't tell me that now we're almost up to 30 states that have actually passed bills, that teachers are actually being charged fines, being fired for reading Ta-Nehisi
I
Coates.
mean, there's
You're like,
there's that not even going as far as the classical arguments and attempts to ban books. There's modern authors that like there's the school board woman who brought a book from the local high school library to the sheriff's office and demanded that the sheriff press charges
oh yeah.
against the
Mm-hmm.
library and the school district. I mean, come
Right. That's what I'm
on.
saying. It's like, it's a lot. And it's like you start to feel like you're watching those people climb into the Capitol building every day, like versions of it, right? Um,
Well, I mean,
when
it's a multi-prong assault, right? Like
mm-hmm,
you've always had this multi-prong assault. You've always had the Marjorie Taylor Greens
mm-hmm,
what's her other face? What's that other idiot? Um, but you've always
I know who you talk about.
yeah,
Yeah, I can't think of name right there.
you've
Yeah.
you've always had these kinds of people in the House and in the Senate. On Martin Luther King Day, journalist Kevin Krause
Mm-hmm,
posted a reminder that we're talking about the filibuster. Like the news,
mm-hmm,
aside from MLK, Martin Luther King, and people doing acts of service and or posting quotes out of context of Martin Luther King. Um, the other thing in the news was the filibuster, and just a reminder, that he posted a reminder that the filibuster A hasn't been around that long, and B was the filibuster, by the way, was brought around to
mm-hmm.
blockade efforts at integration. That
Yeah.
was why it was created as a Senate rule. Because
Mm-hmm,
a senator basically used the Roberts rules to figure out that, oh, hey, if I don't
mm-hmm.
give up the floor, they can't take the floor from me.
Right. Right.
And so if there's something that I don't want voted on, I can just talk incessantly until
Mm-hmm.
they either gavel the session closed, or everybody gives up. So that was what the filibuster was originally, and it was brought about to blockade efforts at
Mm-hmm.
integration, at civil rights, and then continued to be used for anti-social efforts in the
Mm-hmm.
Senate, all the way through a reminder that Mr. Krause posted, that Jesse Helms, a Republican from North Carolina, filibustered against the original in the original debate over Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
filibustered the debate, and tried to keep Martin Luther King Day from becoming a national holiday. The filibuster, it makes sense in a way. It avoids that tyranny of the majority. Um, you can't have a tyranny of the majority if the minority can stop you from doing
Mm-hmm.
anything. But we've perhaps gone past where it should be applicable, and it's become a tool of a tyranny of the minority. Now,
Yeah.
now,
Similar to the Electoral College.
right?
It's being used. Yeah. It's something that has to be revisited, if not gone away with altogether.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
yes.
yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and that's what the debate in the Senate is today. I mean, Senator Manchin, the questionably
Mm-hmm.
Democratic senator from West Virginia, and Senator Sinema, the questionably Democratic senator from Arizona, both are adamant that they're not going to vote to change the filibuster rules for
Mm-hmm.
voting rights. Even though they've both voted to carve out exemptions for the budget and for other things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I mean, uh, uh,
Arizona is one of the spaces that has passed, was one of the first states to actually pass a rule against teaching certain things, and having in the rule that teachers could be fined up to $5,000 if caught doing so.
yeah. But I mean, these things, they baffle me. Like these fine things. The Texas, you can be fined up to ten
Oh yeah.
thousand
Mm-hmm.
dollars, but you have to pay it directly to somebody else. This is the only example, by the way, in the law anywhere of the state requiring you to pay another citizen for anything other than
Right.
a contractual obligation that you sign freely of your own accord. The state,
It definitely is like it for one, it's like definitely setting up a whole slew of like lawsuit time, but it's also setting up it. it's also at this time where people are not entering education to teach, who are not seeking certificates. Like we're seeing that number decrease across ethnicities and gender, is the fact that this is also stopping people from coming into the profession itself.
I mean, but who
Right?
wants to deal with all this? Who wants to deal with
Right.
who wants to deal
But
with
that's the thing.
politicians attacking them, and then they got to go to a school board meeting with a school board that doesn't want them, and then they got to go to and then they got to listen to that school board meeting be infiltrated by literal national operatives, literally people being paid to go to multiple
Yep.
school board meetings and
Mm-hmm.
represent fascism and racism, like literally
Yep.
being paid.
And then be paid and be recorded and then be like put on repeat rent cycle like over and over. It's like a button, like click, click, like over and over again. It's like somebody, it's like the little cat playing the computer on the meme. It's like again, repeat,
Instant
repeat.
replay.
It's like an instant replay. I mean, it almost even sounded like it got to a point that a group of us as parents and as Black educators had to start shining a light on Black and brown educators and parents during this time. Because what we don't talk about is how many of us have been already fired for these things before it was even a law.
Because you
Right?
were teaching the truth, and the school board didn't
Right.
want the truth taught. So and,
Right.
and these firings fascinate me because it's the right to work state firings. They find some other reason to fire you. They don't say, oh, we don't like that you taught this actual historical fact in your class. No, they're like, oh, we don't like the way you dressed today.
Right. Or it's literally like when you think about the teacher out of Tennessee. I think he had been teaching 21 years, 20 years. And the board, what was it, last month or was it December, upheld their decision to let him go for I think it was he taught Dear White America, but he had taught it like it was like a new piece. And his course is basically on current events. So it was a current event piece. And yeah, I mean, they're literal like, and of course, there's lots of grassroots organizations that are supporting people on the ground in this work, supporting teachers and trying to definitely help them along the way. But it is like you said, like in spaces where it's a right to work state, then they're literally kind of on their own because they don't even have like a union legal team to like support them. It's kind of just like you're kind of going, you're like dun dun dun, like you're by yourself. And then it's also like, why would you want to deal with that? And now on top of that, why would you want to deal, like if you're talking about even like schools in Philadelphia, New York, and Chicago and Boston, why do you want to go to schools where you literally are just walking into a COVID positivity rate every day? I have to say like half of my friends who teach for Philadelphia public schools were either sick by Christmas Day or the whole house was definitely sick by New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I mean, I fully support what the Chicago Teachers Union did, and I don't understand how a Democrat mayor can be so anti-union and expect to, well, and even I don't know that she expects to get reelected, but I don't know how you would.
It's such an interesting story that story for another time.
Yeah.
That's an interesting story because she wasn't the go-to, right? Like
Right.
she wasn't really expected to be elected, but the other person who the teachers union did support ran a great campaign and then decided, I don't know, she was like, oh, let's do some stuff at homophobic stuff at churches. And we were like, this, huh? Where did that come from? And then it was like,
Yeah, I
I was
mean,
like,
Chicago politics has always been. I mean, we could delve into Chicago politics for like hours, but
well, that's where I'm from. So I know even
but,
more than I would like to know. So yeah, it's but I do appreciate the fact that the teachers there have an accountability partner, because that's really what's needed when you're in these situations where because people always like, why would the district make you go back to school? I was like, they're a business when it's a big school district.
Yeah.
And going back to school saves them money.
Yep.
So that's their whole focus. So when you're like, why does the superintendent make these terrible decisions? He's horrible. Yeah, he's also doing his job. Like that's
Yeah.
exactly what he's supposed to do. So you need to have in the stopgap an accountability partner,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that goes into like why labor spaces for labor, especially for Black and brown people, is really important to have those things.
I realize, audience, that it's 11 a.m. I just wanted to, I wanted to wrap up one more thing. If you got a minute, Tamara, I wanted to talk about one more thing. Speaking of labor, you know, while all these teachers can get fired at the drop of a hat, it seems like there's practically nothing that can get a member of the policemen's unions fired. I just want we've got a really great comptroller here in the city of Philadelphia, Rebecca Reinhardt. She does a lot of great work through her office into investigating the money aspects of different departments of the city of Philadelphia, and she's been recently really delving into, in detail, what is causing the decline in conviction rates, the decline in resolve rates for crime in the city of Philadelphia. I mean, I have my opinions, and there's lots of people with lots of opinions, but you know, in this particular case, Rebecca's being a scientist, and she's analyzing it very carefully and very diligently. But you know, and she published an op-ed this past weekend talking about some of that research and citing issues with the DAO, the district attorney, and the police department. I would say that the electorate of the city of Philadelphia has done a pretty good job at trying to reform the district attorney's office. We've stuck with a district attorney who is controversial but is making changes to the district attorney's office. I would say that we've done a pretty good job at making crime less publicly acceptable, less part of the social norm in Philadelphia. I will freely admit that, you know, like, crime in poor neighborhoods is sometimes treated as socially acceptable. You know, you get those folks who are like, oh, you know, the system ain't got me, so I ain't got the system. You know, I'm not gonna. Right. I'm not gonna snitch. I'm not gonna, you know, talk on. I'm not gonna, you know, worry about it if somebody's house gets broken into or somebody's car gets stolen. But I'd say that the social structure of the city of Philadelphia, I'd say that it's becoming less likely that people will support that kind of thing. All that being said, the one part of the equation that Philadelphians as a city population don't have control or influence over is the Philadelphia Police Department. We're 2 layers removed from any sort of impact that we can have on the police department. The police department budget is decided basically by the police department. The police department hirings and firings are decided by the police department, more directly by the union itself, by the Philadelphia Policemen's Union, and Lodge 5. They decide, you know, if somebody goes up for firing, it goes to a hearing with Lodge 5.
But I think too, it's really important to also know that, so because they're the Fraternal Order of Police, they're not a part of AFL-CIO.
Right.
And so because of that, it's really important to, and that's difficult because we have been kind of trained to think like, oh, it is why stuff is possible. Like it's why since the 1960s, their budget and their contract isn't public. You're a part of AFL, so everything has to be public information, right? We have to see your contract. We have to see what you negotiated. It has to be public, even if it's underneath 5 rows at the end of an email address. It still has to be public. The fact that they just had hearings, the very first hearings on their budget last year because of a rule set out from Harrisburg, that city council hosted and sponsored. When you read what was inside the budget, when you hear what's inside the budget, which we've talked about before, you realize it's just what you said. It's a very circuitous protection, right? That's why I think it's really interesting. They're called for turnover police. They're like a game more so than like an accountability partner, right? They're basically supporting themselves within. So what we're seeing now when we see police officers actually being charged and actually losing their jobs, that has to do with public perception, the push of public perception and the push of like the push of the public really on those spaces that makes those decisions possible.
Well,
Because like
hold that thought. I just want to, in that vein, the thing that I wanted to bring to today's broadcast is the public perception of Joey Bologna. Joseph Bologna, a lieutenant on the Philadelphia Police of the Philadelphia Police Department, recently famous for or infamous for, I guess, allegedly striking a protester with a baton at the summer protests, peaceful protests in support of police changes to policing because of the George Floyd incident. If you look at, so I was trying to remember some of the facts of what was going on because recently, because of Rebecca Reichardt's piece, I was trying to remember, like what happened with Joey Bologna. Well, Joey Bologna, if you just Google him, Joseph Bologna, Philadelphia, you realize that back in the early 2000s, there was a piece by a news organization here in Philadelphia, won multiple awards for investigative journalism, where they investigated reports that a part of the police department was ransacking bodegas, little corner stores, every time that they were called for a report of a crime at those bodegas. So bodegas weren't calling the police in case of crime any longer. And there were all these reports that, oh, when the police come, they actually ransack our business. And, their investigative reporting actually showed that this was actually happening. They found video evidence of this actually happening. They found multiple eyewitnesses to this happening. Long story long, of course, this went to adjudication, and people were trying to, say, oh, the cops were trying to say, oh, like they weren't doing this. And long story long, all the police that were involved in it were removed from suspension and put back on the force, and they were found not guilty. Also, long story long, Joseph Bologna was a captain at that time, and he was the captain of the group of officers who was accused of these crimes. And
like you can't make this up. You're like, oh.
Okay. I just like, all right.
Right. So basically, the information has always been there.
Right. He's always been a bad cop.
You're like, and yeah.
I got nothing. I got nothing. How can somebody like that not get fired from their job? Like, how can they not?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. Like it is very internal. Like I like even now, if you think about I forget, gosh, now I'm going back. The guy in the 90s in Chicago who's basically he beat up a bunch of people. Like it was known, like he would like beat them within an inch of their life in this room. And it happened in the 90s. And it just was like recently, I'm gonna find out what this is because I hate like going to his name. But now there's not only a curriculum that's mandated to be taught about this particular period of time in history in Chicago, I think for 8th graders and 10th graders, but there's also a reparations type thing. Like there is money that has been put together for the families of that particular what that cop did, right? Now, I can't remember if the cop was fired. I'm sure he was, whatever, but I just know that that case, which is similar to what you're talking about, and what happened afterwards became like a model for like what you can do in these situations, right? That actually show that you're trying to like make some sort of change. Now it's like a rule in the city around these types of things. But
Well, I mean,
yeah.
and this is very similar to something that happened here in Philadelphia. And for the folks that are arguing online about, like Larry Krasner's the worst DA ever or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, here's how we got Larry Krasner. It goes back to the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
where the detectives division of the Philadelphia police was investigated, found to be setting up and illegally convicting hundreds of people a year, like something like 60% of their cases that were
Mm.
resolved against somebody who didn't commit the crime
Oh
and that
wow.
later evidence exonerated. Um, so that's how we ended up here because it started there. The Philadelphia detectives were famous for railroading people into
Oh
convictions,
yeah.
and
I heard
then
that.
and then they were fired, and the DA at the time quit, which is how we got Seth Green, and then Seth Green, because he was a rapid hire, wasn't the best DA ever, and then we went through a series of
Mm.
these things. We went through DA district attorney reform. Then we went to the district attorney actually looking
Mm.
into what the police were doing, and then the police pushing back and pushing out or firing or getting fired the DA, and then we get a new DA who
Mm. Mm.
we've been back and forth like this for a number of years. So it's been 20 something years, probably maybe 15 ish. I don't
Mm.
remember exactly the year that this all started, but that's how we ended up with Krasner. So for all you arguing about resolve rates and the sudden drop of resolve rates in the 90s, yeah, this is why the resolve rates dropped is because we stopped convicting people who weren't guilty. Um,
Yeah, no, that's actually true. And you also, it's always important for people to understand what the DA's actual job is. That like if you have if the turnover police are like this is the DA we want, and they tell you that at the voting place, that is not the DA you want. The DA is supposed to be the accountability partner between the public and the police. So if the DA, he or she is their top boss, literally. So if you got somebody who's in their back pocket, then you just have another you got a cop that's just like the cops you got, because that's why their term coined the term top cop is the term for them, because they are that. Like when Krasner came to office and literally told the police, please stop bringing me cases of people smoking weed.
yeah,
I kind of just don't care,
yeah.
like just figure something else out. And people like, yay. I'm like, that as much as you may say that may not be a big thing, that's a huge thing. Because that's what a lot of people being like picked up on. The fact that we started actually testing our rape kits at a more faster rate. You know what I'm saying? But all of that, once again, has to do with public nudges. Like when you really go back, like what you just said, like it's 10 years of work with a lot of these grassroots organizations to get to this point that may not seem like it's the best point, but it's like the point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, one last thing of public nudges. The three Sharon Hill officers have been charged with voluntary and involuntary manslaughter in the death of Fanta Bility. So this is the case where a high school football game was letting out of the stadium. There were shots fired a couple hundred yards from the stadium in an argument between two
Mm.
teenagers. And three patrol officers who were monitoring the exit of the game decided to just start shooting towards a car that was driving towards. It's not
Right.
funny, but it's
But I mean, no, I
hilarious.
mean, yeah, because it's just it. Oh gosh, yeah,
It's not
hmm
funny, but
yeah.
how
It's.
can
I
you
mean,
be that afraid of your own, like the people that you're
well,
serving
also
and
too. Well,
protecting?
but that's the thing. It's like, but that's another thing and that also goes back to like, what I kept seeing at that Capitol thing. You kept hearing, especially when you look at the documentary about it. You kept hearing, "Oh, I feared for my life," and the one guy who literally had a heart attack when they dragged him out. But not once did many of you all pull a gun. Like for like like most everyday people would have been shot dead in that situation. Like the fact that like that's the same excuse you use for shooting unarmed people,
Right,
right?
right.
I was scared, or when somebody's having a literal mental illness attack, and because we literally, especially here in Philadelphia, I think we only have one police precinct that has a mental health section, like like
We
to
we have now successfully deployed mental health counselors to the
yeah.
emergency line to 911, and so they're supposed to be consulted on any mental health calls that come in to ascertain who should actually be sent to the call. And there are mental health specialists that are supposed to be sent to calls now. But yeah, I mean, like, there's just so much. I'm just gonna wrap up for the day because we could obviously go on forever. Um, and I appreciate you for.
No, I love it. And I also hope to, I'm gonna connect with you offline too, because I wanted to find out, because you had sent me the information, but I wasn't able to find out the dates of like the next meetings or happy hours when you all do stuff for the Philadelphia Dramatist Center, because I was interested. I am
Awesome,
interested.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. We'll connect about the PDC shortly, but and maybe we can organize something to join together on your projects.
Yeah,
Because the PDC sponsors projects and we work with other organizations often. All right. Well, thank you for being my guest today, Tamara. Tamara Anderson, Gumbo Lab. Any last thoughts? Anything you need everybody to know?
yeah, no, just to circle back, just remember to look for that the huge social media push is coming out as far as fundraising and more information about the events for artists. And if you're interested, directors who are interested in working and new projects, continue to definitely stay in contact with me about those things. And and I'm excited to see this stuff all get off the ground. This is good.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for being my guest today, and feel free to drop back in anytime. I'm gonna go to just a one shot of me, but thanks for coming today, and I'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks to my audience for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I appreciate if you stuck around for the extra 20 minutes of talk here. We get into these topics and there's so much history. There's so many links to current events. There's so much to talk about and to understand. And hopefully, um, some of the information that we bring around really helps you connect the dots and think about these topics from a black perspective, from a person of color perspective. You get at least my unvarnished opinion. Um, if you like what you've seen, please tune in next week. We've got some tax filing information for you. Our special guest will be Amy Smith of Philadelphia. Uh, tax preparation for Philadelphia artists. That's actually a website name. Taxprepforphillyartists.com. So yeah, tune in next week. We'll talk to Amy Smith about prepping your 1099s for this year's what's sure to be an exciting tax season with the IRS already issuing some information that might be detrimental to when you receive your tax return. Well, maybe we'll talk a little bit about mittens, Mitt Romney, and some topics that we didn't get to today. Mittens saying he'd work with the Democrats on voter uh, voting rights, the Voting Rights Act, and getting voters better representation. But we'll talk about that. And yeah, we are always publishing new information on our Twitter and Facebook feeds. Light Thief Prod on Twitter, Facebook.com/Light Thief Productions, Light Thief Productions on YouTube as well. And feel free to follow us on all of those spots. Hit the like button on this broadcast if you like what you've seen. Hit the subscribe button to get notified when we go live. It is every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. And please tune in next week. Let me know if there's anything that is interesting to you. In the meantime, you can tell us about those points of interest on our Patreon. Our Patreons get access to communicating directly with us, and hope to see you there and talk to you there, and let us know how you like the show. So have a great week, everyone.